Good evening and a very warm welcome to First Issues. In our continued efforts to improve the quality and content of our show, we have an exciting new development. A new addition to the First Issues team who joins me as co-presenter on this weekly show. I am very pleased to introduce Bonolo Moletsane. Hello, Bonolo.
Hi, Namitso. And hello to our viewers at home. I am equally excited to be joining you on today's program, especially as we interrogate a statement made by a competition authority representative that public procurement in Botswana makes some people rich and others poor. As well as continue our series on food safety issues, where we will find ways to ensure that the water we are consuming is not hazardous to our well-being. Pertinently, as now there is water rationing and some consumers are forced to keep emergency supplies. Join Namitso as she presents our findings.
Earlier this year, at the 4th National Competition Conference held at the Gaborone International Convention Center, the Competition Authority's Director of Legal and Enforcement, Duncan Morotsi, leveled some bold criticisms regarding the local tendering process. Most notably, in a statement that deservedly made it into the headlines, he said that in Botswana, public procurement makes some rich and impoverishes others, pointing to the fact that some people have been tendering for the past 25 years with absolutely nothing to show for it. He also said that the practice in which government jobs go to those who quote the lowest price places price above quality of service and may jeopardize the successful completion of a job tendered for, and that the practice sets the scene for collusion and bid rigging by suppliers. Before he was done, he also pointed to suspicious cases of direct appointment within public procurement that have many questioning why certain companies are directly appointed all the time at the exclusion of others. As a clearly vocal mouthpiece from an institution created to ensure that there are fair market practices, we had to reach out to him to find out in more detail what they have uncovered, as well as try to discern the full implications of these uncompetitive practices. Before we get to Duncan Morotsi's controversial assertions, however, we ask that he explain to our viewers, for context, how a company's dominance within a market does not necessarily point to uncompetitive practices.
So in terms of the Competition Act, dominance is not an infringement. In other words, there's nothing wrong with any company acquiring any dominance or being dominant. Dominance really means when a company has got a higher market share than others, and that is not a problem. It's only a problem when the company will use that dominance to abuse it in order to lessen competition in the market or constrain competition in the market.
When does a company's market dominance become abuse of dominance? Mr. Morotsi gives an example.
If a company has got a big market share, it tends to think that it can do what it wants without fearing any constraints or competition from those who are not dominant in the market. So for instance, if a company B is manufacturing or is distributing, let's say, shoes, for an example, and there are other companies in the market who are horizontally placed, in other words, they are also dealing the same product like this other company, this company may decide one day just to lower the price of shoes because it's a dominant company, just got economies of scale. In other words, they've got plenty of stock. They can decide one day to reduce the price so that the competitors may find it difficult to sell their product. It may be for 6-8 months, and when others are now out of, or they exit the market because they cannot compete with this guy because of his lower price, then that is abuse of dominance. It's called predatory pricing. In other words, you predate on others by saying, okay, because I'm big, I'm going to reduce the price and you guys are not going to compete with me. The other instance of abuse of dominance is when you are the supplier of goods, to others. You just decide one day to reduce supply. You refuse to supply them knowing that if you refuse to supply them, they'll close shop and you remain being the person who is now in business alone. That's an abuse of dominance.
What of the instance in which, let's say, a dominant supermarket, for example, starts supplying itself with products such as meat, vegetables, toilet paper, and so on? Does that amount to the abuse of dominance within the market?
Company B is a huge retail enterprise. And in the beginning, it goes out buying tomatoes, milk from traders and farmers and so forth. And as time goes on, it starts to mill its own sorghum. The time goes on, it starts to have its own chickens to lay eggs. The time goes on, it starts to have its own fleet of transport. That is vertical integration. In other words, we are saying, though we are promoting the economy in other enterprises by buying from them, but there are certain pockets of our trade which we want to integrate. In other words, we want to own them to cut costs. Vertical integration really is to promote efficiency. If you are saying we have got our own transport that we control, at least you know that when your fleet is alive and it will bring the goods home. Nobody will say, oh, my truck broke down, I can't come now, blah, blah, no. So when we talk of vertical integration, I say, no, there are those things which we need to control ourselves for the purpose of efficiency. And also, not only efficiency, also for saving costs, because once we have our own chickens, the cost of producing an egg probably is going to drop if it's ourselves. And if we put it on the shelf, we are going to sell an egg cheaper than if we buy it from somebody else. So vertical integration has got its own advantages actually in competition because it enhances the efficiency of an enterprise. And that's innovation as well. The guy is thinking beyond where he is. He thinks, well, if I do this, I'm likely to improve my business.
Welcome back to the show as we delve into factors affecting fair public procurement practices in Botswana. As mentioned earlier in our show, our guest takes issue with the current system in which government awards tenders to the lowest quote. He says not only may it compromise the quality of a project, but also allows for unscrupulous individuals to win tenders through bid rigging. Bid rigging, of course, being a matter consistently discussed within the public space, thanks to cases such as the ongoing 114 million Pula bid rigging case involving sugar beans. The two companies involved recently revealed to have possibly rigged another 20.4 million Pula bid for the supply of infant formula to the Ministry of Health. Does Mr. Morotsi have an alternative model in mind for government to use other than the one that favors the lowest bidder?
Our concern is the so-called lowest prices that are charged government are not necessarily the lowest prices. They're not necessarily the lowest prices. Because at the end of the day, when you talk of bid rigging, we're talking of companies agreeing on prices. How do we manipulate our prices to win a tender? And you are saying that the problem with government is, we tend to go for the lowest price without really going deep to understand the bidding itself, let alone people wanting to know where the product comes from and how much it costs where it comes from. So, yes, we are saying maybe if government can come up with a system where when they want to issue out a tender, they do what you call a product survey or market survey of a product, where when they go out to see, who are the bidders? Where do they come from? What is the cost of the product or the service they want to buy? What is the quality? Because once they know these things, when it comes to price, they'll know when somebody is trying to overcharge them. But in most cases, I'm saying the lowest price to government is probably the highest price out there.
Can we therefore conclude that there is need for the interrogation of tenders beyond just compliance and price?
government must go out and do what you call a market survey of a service and a product. They must know that, okay, this person is charging us so much because he has put in ABCD as overheads and so forth, and therefore this is the reasonable price that we can pay for. If they know the price, then they'll know what they're paying for. But it looks like government doesn't do that. They rely on information given by bidders who say, there's the product, it's from China, it costs so much, and that is it. And I'm saying government is paying heavily for that. In other countries, the practice is there. But in Botswana, unfortunately, it's even couched in a phrase that there is what you call a government price. You see? There's a price that can be given to you, and there's a price that can be given to government. They're not the same.
Another worrying observation that has been made is a practice in which, quote, tenders are crafted to suit certain people. We asked him to elaborate.
In competition law, that's what is really called standardization or specifications. If you issue out a standard, or you make a standard, or you come up with specifications for a particular product that you want, and that product may sometimes tend to talk to a certain industry, and in that industry, it may even point to a particular enterprise. Are with me? And at the end of the day, when the government is to purchase that product or service, they know who to go to. They appoint that person directly because he happens to be the only person who meets that specification. And we are saying direct appointments are not wrong in competition law, because in most countries they come as an exception. Exception meaning they are used when one is life or death. In other words, if the Ministry of Health cannot wait to tender, they can appoint somebody to provide the nation with something that can save lives. That in terms of national security, direct appointments in other countries are used in those exceptions where, because of the security of the country, yes, you have to appoint somebody directly because of other issues. You cannot tender. That is okay. But we are saying where even people are buying candles, as an example, torches, toilet paper, why should there be a direct appointment? It's an abuse, because there's an element of even corruption behind it, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, you are also killing competition, because if there are many people who are dealing that product, companies horizontal placed in that market to deal with that product, and only call 2 people to come and tender. What about the others who are there also waiting to compete with them? So direct appointment should be used as an exception, but in Botswana, as we've been going around, it's more or less now a form of procurement. In other countries, it is an exception to general tendering, where everybody's called. But I think we are saying, no, let's not use it like that. It's being abused.
Can we assert from these findings that the country is losing a lot of money through the current system of procurement?
Yeah, and direct appointment is one of the worst, I think. So because it circumvents the procuring, the tendering process, because people tend to use it by saying, well, this is my limit, because if you go above this limit, you have to tender, isn't it? So they now hide behind limits, and those limits, at the end of the day, if you count the money used, you reach 10 million people, isn't it? As an example. Yeah. So they must go out for public tendering, and I think where government is saying, let companies rival each other to give us this product. We are likely to get quality, we are likely to get a reasonable price out of that. But if you pointed a finger and somebody's going to give you a government price, that's what I'm talking about. Direct appointments calls for government prices. There's no competition there. Yeah.
Welcome back, as now we get into our food safety topic of the day. In the past 2 weeks, we have looked at different aspects of food safety. First, Common practices in Botswana, such as cooking vegetables in the sack they are purchased in at events such as funerals and weddings, as well as the practice of cooking maize in big rusty drums for sale to the public, and how such food safety violations endanger our personal health as well as that of the economy. Then second, we looked into how we can avoid consuming chemicals that are bad for our health, either introduced into the food we eat during the manufacturing of processed foods, or at the household level by ourselves when we do not handle food correctly. Water is an important element to this discussion because not only is it consumed, it is also used in the preparation of food. The topic in general is significant to a developing economy such as ours, in light of the fact that food and waterborne diseases are the leading causes of illness and death in less developed countries, killing approximately 1.8 million people annually, a huge blow to development efforts for a variety of reasons. Having previously warned us of what heavy metals consumed through food can do to our bodies, returning guest Dr. Bontle Mbongwe, who is soon to do a study on the levels of cadmium, lead, mercury and arsenic in the Gaborone and surrounding areas' drinking water to see if they meet the Botswana Bureau of Standards regulations, says what we first need to understand is that water is food.
It is extremely important that whatever water that we want to store it in containers. First of all, like we are saying, a container that we know is safe, especially if we know that we are going to use that water for drinking. Safety here means whatever sikubu or container that you have, make sure that you know what that container previously, the initial contents or original contents of that container were. Was it a bad chemical, whether it was a fertilizer or whatever? If it was, how sure are you? You must be 100% sure that that container has been thoroughly cleaned. And my advice is that if it is a container that was used, for example, to keep hazardous chemicals like fertilizers or pesticides or whatever, don't use that container for drinking water. You may use it maybe just for water that you keep for laundry or for other purposes, flushing the toilets or whatever, but not for drinking purposes. For drinking purposes, it is advisable that you buy a container, one that is at least, we're sure that it has been disinfected. Let's say you buy just a clean container from a shop. Make sure that first you are going to disinfect it, clean it with soap and clean water, and make sure that that soap is thoroughly cleaned. And if it's for drinking, it is advisable that at least you keep it cold. The reason why you keep it cold is just to make sure that the microorganisms are not going to grow in that water. And for drinking water, really it is advisable that you don't keep it, if you keep it in a refrigerator, then at least it can stay longer, a week or so. But if it's outside the refrigerator, any drinking water, make sure that if you are to drink it, if you don't have a refrigerator, then at least boil it so that if you have kept it for a number of days, boil it so that you can kill the microorganisms in that water.
So boiling gets rid of the bulk of contaminants in water. What are the heavy metals that you refer to so often? Can we be safe that if we boil our water, regardless of its condition, it is good to drink?
What I'd like to say here is when you boil water, essentially you are killing the microorganisms, the bacteria and other things. But you are not getting rid of, if that water had any pesticides or it had any heavy metals in the likes of lead and things, you will not destroy them. They will stay in that water. So other precautions for making sure that your water is free of heavy metals are necessary. if you, the importance here is water may get contaminated from your household level through heavy metals. For example, people are advised not to drink water from a geyser or water that was kept in a kettle, like a water kettle, overnight. Why? Because a kettle, for example, is soldered. Some of the soldering material could contain lead. Some have been found to have that. Some could contain other heavy metals, and that would actually, the heat will release those heavy metals will help to release those heavy metals and therefore get them into your water. So never ever cook with water from a geyser or drink water from a geyser. So always boil fresh water and drink it, because otherwise that water would have those heavy metals in it.
We are looking at the performance of the BSE in the past week. In the past week, the Domestic Company Index, or DCI, went up by a marginal 0.12%, whereas the Foreign Company Index, or the FCI, closed the week up by 0.01%. Trading activity was slightly reduced in the past week. We traded a total turnover of 4.7 million shares compared to about 135.9 million in the previous week. This was generated from a total of 1.2 million shares in comparison to about 27.8 million shares in the previous week. In terms of ETFs, the Beta ETF closed the week down 13 tabe to close at 41.45 tabe. New Gold lost 10 tabe to close the week at 112.40 tabe, whereas the New Plat lost 5.75 tabe to end the week at 106 pula a unit.
That is all we had for you this evening. I trust that you and I will be seeing much more of each other from now on. From me, Bonalo Moletsani,
And I, Nameta Samakula.
the rest of the First Issues crew, our valued sponsor, First National Bank, enjoy the rest of your evening, and don't forget to tune in next week as we present to you yet another issue of interest.